What you have been calling just enough was actually my way of teaching you that my vessel never runs empty. Not the slim margin you have been mentally counting at the end of each month. Not the careful rationing you have been performing on your own affection because someone long ago taught you affection ran out. Not the cautious portion of peace you allow yourself before guilt arrives and confiscates the rest. The brim of your cup in this very hour is already higher than your hand can register. And the table around you is set with more than your eye has yet been trained to see. Stay near this kitchen counter for the minutes ahead. Let me show you why the phrase just enough has been a lid you placed on a cup I have been quietly filling past the rim for years. And let me set into your hand a sentence I once spoke through a weary prophet to a weary people. A sentence that will hush in this very hour the long suspicion that the abundance I keep speaking about belongs to other lives and never to yours. Hear the line under everything else I am about to say to you. Your cup is overflowing in heaven before it overflows in your hand. I see you. Your fingers have been measuring the rim of the same small cup for years, looking for the precise level past which you would finally be allowed to relax. The mother who stopped asking me for help with her finances because she came to believe that requesting more than survival was a kind of greed I would not honor. That mother is in front of me now. The father who lost his job 2 springs back has retrained himself to call constant tension responsibility and did not notice when the word changed shape inside him. A young one quietly agreed with the comparison voices that the love arriving in her life would always be smaller than the love arriving in other lives, and stopped praying for fullness because partial seemed like the realistic ceiling. An older one watched the table where her family once gathered grow thinner each year and has begun apologizing inwardly for the size of her hope that the table will gather again. A widow measured the small jar of oil one more time at the end of a long month and tried not to picture what would follow the bottom. A single one whose apartment has felt too quiet for too long trimmed the dream of partnership down to at least a few good friends because the smaller version felt less foolish to keep carrying around. Someone whose health stopped cooperating 2 springs back has narrowed the prayer down to fewer bad days because the word thriving began to feel like vocabulary for other people. A family eating in shifts because work hours do not line up has stopped expecting evenings together because expecting it began to hurt. None of this trimming is invisible to me. Each smaller request landed on my ear with the full weight of what it was originally meant to be. And the original size has been carried in my hand on your behalf the whole stretch you have been settling for the trimmed copy. Not impatient with the trimming. Tender about it. A heart that was disappointed early learns almost as a survival skill to measure the cup carefully so disappointment cannot pour over the rim a second time. That is not faithlessness. That is the bruise of a child who once held the cup forward with both hands and watched someone tilt the pitcher away. I do not scold the bruise. I am widening the cup from the inside slowly so the abundance arriving has room to enter without crushing the part of you that grew cautious for good reasons. Open both hands in your lap. Turn the palms upward. Let them stay there for the length of the next paragraph without doing anything useful with them. That posture of upturned palms is older than language itself. Older than any organized prayer. Your hands have been working as a lid on the cup for a long stretch, clamping, gripping, holding the lip steady so that whatever was inside would not spill out into a room you did not trust. Allow them to step off lid duty for a short while. Notice how the underside of each palm cools a little once it is no longer pressing against an edge. Those hands at rest in your lap were not built to be lids. They were built to be cups themselves. A cup is what a hand becomes the moment it stops trying to hold things in and starts being willing to take in what is being poured. Breathe with me. 3 slow ones. In through the nose without forcing. Out through the mouth without performance. 3 is plenty. Notice how the third exhale stretches on its own a little longer than the first with no instruction from you. A chest that has been trusted with an honest invitation tends to lengthen by itself. The lengthening is not a technique you owe me. The lengthening is recognition. Something inside you knows the difference between a demand and an offer, and it is responding to mine the way a familiar door responds to a familiar hand. Hear that line a second time slowly as you sit with the hands open. Long before any abundance arrives on the table down here, it is already at full pour in the upper room where I prepare what is yours. The reason you have not yet felt the rim filling against your fingers is not that I am holding back. It is that your inside structure is still being widened to take a pour whose volume would otherwise crack the cup at the seam. Each season you walk with me, I am quietly enlarging the cup. What looks from the outside like a slow trickle is the side effect of a much larger pouring being kept upstream until the cup down here can take it without breaking. The habit of trimming what you ask for was not invented by you. It was installed by careful hands across many seasons. A parent once measured every plate at the table and made you feel ashamed of being the one whose appetite was largest. And a small filing system inside you decided right then that asking openly was a form of misbehavior. A teacher in some classroom told the room that wanting too much was the first sin, and you privately agreed never to want too much again. A relationship ended one season after you had named a larger hope, and the person leaving said on the way out the door that the love between you could not hold what you had requested, and the conclusion lodged in your wiring without your permission. Inside one place of worship, the prayers of the polished ones sounded so humble that yours suddenly sounded greedy by comparison, even though greed had nothing to do with what your heart was actually asking for. None of those lessons came from me. Some of the mouths that taught them loved you in their own way and was simply passing along a portrait that had been pressed upon them by the generation before, never inspected. Other mouths copied the tone of my voice on purpose to keep you small enough to remain useful to their own purposes. Either origin, a fake ceiling settled over the top of your cup, and that ceiling has had you mistaking the lowness of a lid for the actual height of the room above it. Lift the lid off. The ceiling was never put up by me. Sky is the real height above your cup, and sky is the size of my intention for what fills it. You were taught in one place or another along the road. That abundance was a prize awarded to believers who finally produced enough faith to deserve it. You were taught that the saints with full cups must have manufactured the fullness from within by long discipline, sustained giving, sleepless intercession, a quality of confidence you have never quite been able to keep continuous for longer than a stretch. You were taught that asking for more than survival was suspect, and that asking for a peaceful house was almost greedy, and that asking for the restoration of a family was nearly proud. You were taught that a believer whose cup looks low must have done something to lower it, because the spiritual ones in the front row always seem to have plenty. That is not how abundance has ever moved through my kingdom. Filling any cup has never gone by that rule on my side of the counter. A picture has been hanging in the inner room of your chest for years. A believer with raised hands, gleaming smile, wallet thick, problem solved, life polished down to brochure. And the brush that painted it was not mine. Some of those painters loved you in their own way and were repeating a portrait handed to them by tired generations before. Other painters borrowed my name on purpose to sell you a smaller gospel that needed your striving in order to keep its lights on. Either origin, the portrait was wrong, and it has been quietly teaching you that abundance comes shaped like a billboard when the actual shape of abundance in my economy is much closer to a kitchen table at the end of a long day with the right people around it and a soft lamp on. Lean the billboard against the wall. Allow me to describe what overflow actually looks like inside my household. Overflow in my economy is not first a bank account growing. It is a marriage that has begun talking again after a long silence. It is a body that has finally agreed to sleep through the night for the first stretch in months. It is a child returning a phone call without being asked. It is a peace that arrives in the chest on an ordinary Tuesday and stays through the news that lands wrong in the afternoon. It is a friendship that finds its second wind on a walk that had only been planned as 10 minutes. It is the disappearance of a fear that had been living rent-free in your shoulders for so many years you no longer remembered what your shoulders felt like without it. It is a meal that tastes like a meal again. It is a song you used to love coming back on the radio and you sing it. None of that registers on a billboard. All of that is the actual overflow. You have been measuring on the wrong instrument for the wrong substance. Money is also welcome inside the cup. I'm not pretending the bills do not exist. I built provision into the structure of my household, and I have walked many of my children into seasons of unexpected supply because they needed it and I had stored it for them. Provision matters. The numbers in the column matter. The roof and the food and the medicine matter. What you have been told, however, is that overflow means the bank account becomes the headline and the rest of life becomes the footnote. The actual order is the opposite. Peace is the headline. Family is the headline. A sound body is the headline. A heart that has stopped negotiating itself smaller is the headline. Money is one of the chapters underneath, and I bring that chapter on the timeline that does not let it become the lord of the cup. You have been measuring abundance by what shows up on your bank statement at the end of each month. That is the wrong instrument for the substance. Some of my most full cup children across the centuries had thin statements and a wealth no banker could quantify. A home where everyone sat down together and finished the meal without anyone slipping away early. A faith that warmed strangers when they crossed the threshold. A body that was tired in the right way at night because it had been spent on the right loves during the day. Other of my children carried larger statements and also carried a cup I had filled past the rim. Either way, the cup was mine to fill, and the fullness was measured in something the eye cannot read on a piece of paper. I want to read you a sentence I once spoke through one of my old prophets to a people who had stopped trusting me with their abundance. Hear how it came to be carried in my word. After a long exile, a remnant of my people had returned to their land and rebuilt their homes. Yet inside their chests, the old fear of scarcity had survived the journey. They began calculating with me in the way frightened children calculate at the dinner table, eyeing the bread, sliding their portion closer, holding back what they had once been taught to bring openly. They had stopped trusting that the table I had set for them would hold up under their honest hands. The tithe was no longer arriving at the storehouse. The first portion was being trimmed off and stored privately. The remnant had begun loving me at arm's length with the cup held tightly to the chest. So, I sent a tired prophet by the name of Malachi to speak a sentence into the middle of that frightened community. I told him to deliver it to a fearful calculating people, a dare I have almost never offered to anyone in my long history with this earth. Hear the strangeness of it. I do not invite my children to test me. Faith is not a thing tested at my expense. Yet to this particular people in this particular hour, I made an exception. I dared them to bring the full portion openly and without trimming and to watch what I would do in response. Picture them receiving it. A small gathering at the edge of the rebuilt city. Farmers with their hands still smelling of harvest. Mothers with babies on their hips. Elders who remembered the exile and had counted every grain since. They had been bracing for another rebuke about what they had failed to give. What arrived instead was a dare. This is what I said. Malachi chapter 3 verse 10. Bring the full tithe into the storehouse that there may be food in my house, and thereby put me to the test. Says the Lord of hosts. If I will not open the windows of heaven for you and pour down for you a blessing until there is no more need. Stay close to that verse for a moment. Walk through it slowly with me. A fast reading misses the door this sentence is opening. Bring the full tithe. Read those 4 words again. Full. Not the trimmed portion. Not the portion you would feel comfortable losing. Not the leftover after every other anxiety has been paid first. Full. The first slice. The honest one. Why full? Not because I need the bread, child. The storehouse is mine and I had filled it before any of you were ever born. Bring it because what you bring openly is what your own hands learn to receive openly. A cup held closed cannot also be a cup held open. The trimming you have been doing on what you offer is the same trimming that has been keeping you from receiving what is on its way. Tithe in my economy is never a tax. Tithe is a wide opening of the hand on both ends. Into the storehouse. Here where the bringing goes. Into a place I have prepared for keeping what you bring. There's a real storehouse and your name is on the lintel. Whatever you place inside, it is not lost. It is being held by the one who built the storehouse in the first place. The fear that the bringing has vanished has not happened in my economy. What is brought is kept. What is kept is multiplied. What is multiplied returns by a route the eye does not always see in advance. That there may be food in my house. Notice the smallness of the request. Not so that I may become enormous. Not so that the storehouse may overflow for its own sake. So that there may be food in my house. So that the family I am gathering can sit down at a table. So that the orphan and the widow have a place to come. So that the stranger has bread. So that the worship gathered inside the walls of my house has something to share. The blessing I'm about to describe is not for hoarding. It is for circulating. Abundance in my household always moves. The cup that overflows pours into the cup beside it, and thereby put me to the test. Hear how unusual this is from my mouth. Almost never do I invite testing. Faith is the territory where I am trusted without proof. Yet to this calculating remnant and to you now in this hour I am willing to widen the rule. Bring it openly and watch. Do the unusual thing of trusting that the one who built the storehouse can be trusted with what enters it. That is the dare. Not a transactional dare, a relational one. I want you to know I keep my word and I am willing with you to demonstrate it. If I will not open the windows of heaven for you, read this image and let it stand in your mind for a breath. Windows of heaven. Not a small portion lowered through a slit. Windows, plural, open. Heaven itself ventilated downward into your life. Like a house finally getting air on a summer evening. The picture is not of a careful drip from above. The picture is of weather, of rain, of a downpour that you cannot measure with a teacup because the volume has exceeded the instrument. and pour down for you a blessing until there is no more need. Notice the destination of the pouring. Until there is no more need, not until you have a little extra, not until your minimum is covered, until there is no more need. Need itself is what the overflow is aiming to dissolve. The image is not of arriving at sufficiency and stopping there. The image is of pouring past sufficiency, past the rim of every cup in the house until even the floor knows the rain has arrived. Look at the question I asked at the beginning of these words. Why has just enough been the ceiling I keep settling for? Here is the answer. Because no one ever taught you that I had been pouring past the rim into a cup you were holding closed, and the apparent low level was simply the consequence of the lid your own hand had been keeping pressed down. Lift the lid, open the cup, sit at the counter and watch what has been overhead the entire time. Finally, meet the inside of the cup it was always meant to fill. There is also a sentence one of my old singers carried in a song you have heard quoted many times across your life. A song about a table prepared in front of those who once opposed you. About a cup that runs over without your permission. About goodness and mercy following you the way two faithful dogs follow a shepherd through the back hills. The cup running over was never about a contest. It was about a relationship in which the one pouring does not measure scarcely. That song and the dare in Malachi are speaking about the very same kitchen, the very same counter, the very same pitcher in my hand. So, here is something small you can carry with you through the days ahead, while a deeper widening takes its slower time. Whenever the comparison voice arrives to shrink the size of what you are allowed to receive, and it will, because that voice has been your roommate for many years, pause and put one honest question to the cup before doing anything else. What if the lid I am holding down was never mine to hold? That is the whole exercise. Not a doctrine, a simple recalibration of the hand that has been the seal for too long. One layer under that question, when there is room for it. After the lid loosens, refuse the urge to immediately calculate what the new fullness will cost you. Sit with the unfamiliar level for one extra breath. Most of you will rush past the comfort because comfort on that scale feels suspicious. Let the rim of the cup stop feeling like a danger line. Allow your shoulders to register that my storehouse is wider than your kitchen, and that what is being poured will not break the cup, because I designed both the pouring and the cup with each other in mind. A gentler third layer, more like a small bow than an instruction. Whenever you notice a fragment of overflow arriving in your ordinary day, an unexpected kindness, attention that loosened without effort, a peaceful hour you did not earn, a smile from a stranger that warmed something in you, a meal that tasted like a meal again, a child who came back to the table without being asked. Do not write it off as luck. Say it back to me where